There is a world where sunlight never touches, a world of perpetual midnight. At 12,500 feet beneath the surface, the pressure is crushing, 6,000 pounds per square inch. It is enough to snap a human spine like a twig and collapse a lung instantly. Here, in this alien hostility, lies the Titanic. For over a century, explorers have mapped the grand staircase, the bridge, the staterooms, but there is one place that remains the most forbidden, the most haunting, the engine room. Legends say it is a tomb where time stopped. They talk of a pristine luxury car, frozen in rust. They whisper about the Black Gang, the workers who stayed behind to keep the lights on, and who are arguably still standing guard at their posts. But look closer. Why are there no skeletons? Where did the 1,500 bodies go? Today, we unlock the heavy steel doors. We descend into the ship's dead heart to separate the myth from the terrifying reality. Before we can unlock the secrets of the engine room, we must survive the journey to reach it. The descent takes 2.5 hours. It is a slow fall into an alien world. As we pass 3,000 feet, the twilight zone, the last traces of sunlight vanish. The color red disappears first, then yellow, then blue, until there is only black. From here on, we are entering a world of perpetual midnight. Life down here doesn't operate by our rules. In this darkness, creatures create their own light just to hunt, or to hide. But the darkness isn't the enemy. The pressure is. At 12,500 feet, the water pushes against us with the force of 6,000 pounds per square inch. Imagine an elephant standing on your thumb. That is the weight pressing against every inch of this hull right now. One crack, one flaw in the viewport, and it's over. It's called implosion. It happens faster than the speed of nerve impulses. If the hull fails, we would be dead before our brains could even process that we were wet. We are falling through a minefield of physics. Then, after hours of nothingness, the sonar paints a ghost. Out of the gloom, the muddy floor rises up to meet us, and looming above it, the wall of steel. We have arrived at the stern of the Titanic, the gateway to the engine room. To understand the horror, you have to understand the scale. The reciprocating engine room wasn't just a machine shop. It was a cathedral of the industrial age. These weren't just engines. They were leviathans. Standing over 40 feet high, taller than a 4-story building, they remain the largest steam engines ever built for a ship. When the ship was alive, this room was a deafening inferno of heat, steam, and noise. It was the heartbeat of the Titanic. Imagine the smell of burning coal and hot grease. The air was so hot, men worked in thin cotton shirts, shouting to be heard over the rhythmic thunder of 3 massive propellers pushing 50,000 tons of steel through the Atlantic. Now, it is a silent, cold grave. Exploring this space today is a suicide mission for a pilot. The ceiling has collapsed in places, turning the orderly walkways into a chaotic maze of twisted steel. Sharp edges are everywhere, waiting to slice through the delicate hull of a submersible or sever a tether. But the real killers are the wires. Thousands of feet of electrical cabling have rotted loose from the ceiling. They hang in the darkness like invisible nooses, waiting to snag a propeller or trap an ROV. If you get tangled down here, there is no rescue. You stay here, just like the men who died here. Inside this room, at 11:39 p.m., the rhythmic heartbeat of the ship was shattered. A frantic order rang out from the bridge. 3 bells. The needle swung to full astern. Reverse engines. It was a desperate move to avoid the iceberg. But historically, this command is now considered the most controversial moment of the entire disaster. You have to understand, you don't just hit the brakes on a 50,000-ton skyscraper moving at 25 miles per hour. For the engineers, this was a Herculean battle against physics. They had to cut the steam, break the massive spinning shafts, and engage the reversing gears. The whole ship shuddered. They succeeded. They effectively stalled the ship's forward momentum. But in doing so, they accidentally disabled the ship's only way to steer. This is where the tragedy becomes technical. A ship's rudder works like an airplane wing. It needs air, or in this case, water, rushing past it to work. When the propellers are pushing forward, they blast water directly over the rudder, giving the ship grip to turn. Getty image scam fa, but the moment the engineers threw the engines into reverse, they stopped that flow. They created a dead zone of turbulent water behind the ship. Without the prop wash rushing past the rudder, the Titanic lost her steering ability precisely when she needed it most. She became, effectively, a drifting brick. The helm was turned hard over, but the ship barely responded. She was sliding on ice before she even hit the ice. Many historians and naval architects now argue the uncomfortable truth. If the engine room had simply ignored the order, if they had kept pushing full ahead to force water over the rudder, the ship might have turned faster. She might have missed the iceberg entirely. The men in this room followed orders perfectly. They performed a miracle of engineering, and in doing so, they may have unknowingly sealed the ship's fate. While historians debate the mechanics, the public is obsessed with the myth. Specifically the car, the 1912 Renault Coupe de Ville. Thanks to James Cameron's movie, millions of people believe this car is sitting perfectly preserved inside the engine room. A romantic time capsule waiting for a driver who never came. But the ocean is cruel, and Hollywood is fiction. First, let's kill the location myth. The car was never in the engine room. It was crated up in the forward cargo hold, hundreds of feet away from the engines. So, if you go looking for it near the boilers, you are looking in the wrong zip code. But even if you went to the right place, the romantic image is a lie. Think about physics. The car had tires filled with air, a cabin filled with air. As the ship sank, the water pressure built up instantly. Those air pockets didn't just leak, they detonated. The tires would have imploded with the force of a bomb. The elegant wooden frame? Eaten by worms decades ago. The leather seats? Dissolved. If you found the Renault today, it wouldn't look like a vintage classic. It would look like a crushed soda can buried in mud. The only thing that survived was the insurance claim. The owner, William Carter, claimed $5,000 for it. The car is gone. But why is everything in the stern so violently crushed? Why does the engine room look like it went through a blender, while the bow looks peaceful? That brings us to the terrifying physics of the destruction. As you navigate the wreck site today, you notice a disturbing contrast. The front of the ship, the bow, looks majestic. It is sleeping. But the back of the ship, the engine room, looks like it was put through a giant blender. The steel is twisted, ripped, and utterly chaotic. Why does the front look so peaceful, while the engine room looks like a bomb went off? The answer is air. When the Titanic split in two, the bow was already full of water. The pressure inside and outside was equal. So it glided down to the bottom like a falling leaf. Elegant, silent. But the stern, where the massive engines and refrigerated cargo holds were, was different. It was still watertight. It was a cork. It was full of air pockets. As the stern plummeted towards the bottom, spiraling out of control, the water pressure built up instantly. But the air inside fought back. At a depth of about 500 feet, the pressure exceeded the strength of the steel hull. The air pockets didn't just leak, they imploded. It wasn't a slow crush. It was a violent detonation. The hull was ripped apart from the inside out, peeling back the steel plating like wet cardboard. By the time it hit the sea floor, the engine room was already obliterated. It didn't land, it crashed. The force was so great that the massive cylinders, weighing hundreds of tons, were ripped straight off their mountings and thrown into the mud. This violence is why the engine room is such a chaotic tomb today. But amidst this destruction, Amidst the twisted steel and imploded hull, there were men who stood their ground while the world exploded around them. But amidst this mechanical violence, there was something stronger than steel. Human will. Deep inside the twisting hull, the Black Gang was fighting a battle they knew they couldn't win. And leading them was this man, Chief Engineer Joseph Bell. Bell was the father of the engine room. He held the rank of a senior officer. By all accounts, Bell had a chance to escape. When the collision happened, he could have gone up to the boat deck. He could have argued his duty was done when the engines stopped. But he didn't run up. He went down. He rallied his men, firemen, greasers, electricians, and gave them a final order. Keep the boilers firing. Keep the circuits alive. Why? Because of the lights. Survivors in the lifeboats reported that the Titanic did not disappear into darkness immediately. Her lights stayed burning until just 2 minutes before she sank. Those lights gave passengers hope. They allowed people to find the lifeboats instead of stumbling in the pitch black. They prevented absolute chaos. Joseph Bell bought those lives. With his own. He was last seen in this very room, standing in freezing water up to his waist, scalding steam erupting around him, shouting encouragement to his men to keep the dynamos turning for just 1 more minute. He never came up. None of them did. So, the question haunts us. If 35 engineers died in this room, and hundreds of firemen were trapped behind these watertight doors, where are they? Why is the engine room empty? If 1,500 people died here, why don't we see a graveyard? When Robert Ballard discovered the wreck in 1985, he expected to find piles of skeletons. He found 0. On shallower shipwrecks, skeletons can last for centuries. But the Titanic is different. It sits inside a chemical kill zone. The answer lies in chemistry. Specifically, something called the calcium carbonate compensation depth. Above this depth, the ocean is saturated with calcium. Bones stay hard. But below 12,000 feet, where the Titanic lies, the immense pressure changes the water's chemistry. It becomes undersaturated. It becomes hungry. It's a gruesome 2-step process. First, deep-sea scavengers, hagfish and amphipods, strip the flesh away within weeks, leaving only the clean, white skeleton. Then the chemistry takes over. The naked bones are exposed to the undersaturated water, and the ocean simply drinks them. It dissolves the calcium phosphate layer by layer, like sugar in hot tea. Over just a few years, the skeletons vanished. Not a skull, not a rib, just dust mixing with the sediment. The ocean erased the evidence of the crime. But chemistry has a loophole. The ocean could dissolve the bone, but there was one thing it couldn't eat, and it's staring right at us. Chemistry destroyed the bones, but chemistry also saved the shoes. Leather, specifically the heavy, industrial leather worn by the crew, because it was treated with tanning chemicals, chromium salts. To make it durable, it became toxic to deep-sea microbes. The scavengers won't touch it. When you see a pair of boots lying side by side in the mud, don't be fooled. They didn't fall out of a suitcase. Look at the spacing. Look at the angle. They're arranged that way because a human being was wearing them when they hit the bottom. The body decomposed. The skeleton dissolved into the water. But the heavy leather boots, weighed down by gravity, stayed exactly where the feet used to be. Look closely at the laces. The knots tied by human fingers are still tight. These particular boots were found near the stern debris field, close to the engines. This is not just debris. This is a grave marker. These are the tombstones of the Black Gang. They died standing at their posts. And looking at these shoes, in a haunting way, they're still standing there today. We came here looking for ghosts. But inside the twisted steel of the engine room, we didn't find monsters. We found humanity. This place is not just a shipwreck. It is a monument to a choice. The choice to stay in the dark so others could see the light. The next time you watch the movie, don't just look at the romance on the deck. Look past the diamond. Remember Joseph Bell and his men. Remember the shovels scraping against the floor until the very last second. It forces us to ask ourselves a difficult question. If the water was rising and the world was ending, who would you become? The one who runs or the one who holds the line? Would you have the courage to stay? Tell me your answer in the comments. But the engine room is not the only secret down here. There is a room on SeaDeck that has been locked from the inside for 100 years. Whatever is behind that door has never been seen. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We're going to open it next.